All right, so I just a little bit of information about National Center for Systemic Improvement and where this is coming from. State Systemic Improvement Plans, or the SIP. If you are not familiar with it, it really came out of this idea from compliance as well as results. And so you'll see the results-driven accountability. Basically, the states had to complete a PLAF, present levels of their state. What's going on with our data, our infrastructure, and basically write a long-term goal we call the State Identified Measurable Results, or the SIMR. And then phase 2 was filling out all the accommodations. How are we going to keep moving this forward? What are the coherent improvement strategies? And how are we going to identify schools? OSEP was really clear. Do not start statewide. Start with a few pilot districts, try it out, and then continue to scale. And now we've been in phase 3. This is phase 3, where the states are every year they write a large report on what is happening. Are we making our outcomes? What's happening both at the State Department, which I think was probably the biggest aha moment for a lot of states. They did not meet their SIMR. Probably over half have not met their SIMR, but they've been making huge changes to their infrastructure at the State Department. And in writing this from phase 1 through phase 3, realizing like, wow, we cannot work in silos, or we didn't know that this was happening over here, and how everyone together, kind of changing the infrastructure at the State Department. They're also changing some of the infrastructure at the local level. And so I think we're going to start seeing more changes in more states now that we really have shaken up a lot of the infrastructure at State Departments. And so the National Center for Systemic Improvement was funded, as you can see, October of 2014. We are here to help the State Departments really think through that results-driven accountability. We created collaboratives, and one of the collaboratives was mathematics, which is why I was brought in. Every year, as I mentioned, the states write SIPs. We review, for the center, we review the SIPs and write a large report that's shared with OSEP. Okay, so what is it that you're doing? How are you bringing in the general ed counterparts? Because we knew when MTSS was created way back when, 2001-ish, and it was more of RTI, it's supposed to be general ed. But special ed, we tend to have more of that knowledge of progress monitoring, of some of the goal setting. And so, there's still a lot of states that it's a verb. I'm MTSS-ing that student. And a lot of teachers don't necessarily understand truly what is MTSS. And so I know we've been working with states, what's going on at all those tiers. And then this is coming out of the specific math states. So there's a total of 7 states that have a SIMR in mathematics. I will say within the Math Collaborative, we have 7 states that was part of the Math Collaborative. 2, Florida and New Jersey, actually have a graduation SIMR, which hats off to you, because in order to improve graduation, you're hitting behavior and academics. And as you can imagine, they had a huge math initiative, and that's why they joined. But because we're talking math, I wanted to pull out those 7 states that were focused on math. You'll see they mentioned something around, they just listed other evidence-based practices or models. Some have mentioned the NCTM practice standards and focusing on those pieces. You'll still see MTSS was mentioned, Universal Design for Learning, PBIS, inclusive practices, which again, we know that these are very large, and then no mention of evidence-based practice. The SIMR is the state identified measurable result. If you're thinking in special ed IEP terms, it's the state's long-term annual goal. So in phase 1, they went through and 7 states wrote a long-term goal, or their SIMR, to increase math outcomes. Utah, for example, is focused on the middle school level to improve math outcomes. Vermont is focused on improving math outcomes for 3rd through 5th grade, specific to students with emotional behavioral disorders. I'm trying to think, like Puerto Rico is also focused on 3rd through 5th. Maryland is also 3rd through 5th. Rhode Island and Kentucky also has a math SIMR. This is what the states have been working through the last 5 years, is to improve the outcomes specific to that state identified measurable result. All right, so I'm just going to quickly review the MTSS. So this is just coming from a national lens. What are those kind of non-negotiables, but they're negotiables, and how are they framed? And so it's data-based decision-making. Regardless of what state you're in, there's going to be the use of data to drive those instructional decisions. There's typically something around some kind of screening. Sometimes it's called universal assessment. There's this idea of progress monitoring, and then it's multi-level. You'll see that this is very generic because there are some states that tier 3 is considered special ed. I've seen some states in the past that tier 4 was special ed and they had a 4-tier model. They're still general education students first.
So my name is Julia Scheier. I'm a coordinator on the Vermont MTSS team at the Vermont Agency of Education. This graphic is our logo. This represents our framework. We have the 5 components with the systemic and comprehensive approach at the center. And then there's the larger encircling band representing really the coherence of the framework within our state statute, rules, and guidelines, or this is what we refer to as a Vermont MTSS in action. And so if you notice the title, it's capital V, capital T, lowercase MTSS, and that's really used to distinguish Vermont's unique framework from others. In this new field guide, you're not going to see any triangles or pyramids representing a certain number of tiers or percentages of students that might be placed in a tier, as you might find in a more generic internet search of MTSS. We're really working to continue to expand on this model that really leverages all aspects, the full spectrum of the school, all of the people, adults, and students inside to really equitably consider, acquire, and distribute the school or the SU's human and material resources. So as we all know, outcomes for students rest really heavily on the collective leadership of each supervisory union or district and their schools. And throughout our field guide, you're going to find enhanced discussions of the important role of leadership in building those internal cultures that contribute to school improvement, to academics, to social emotional learning, behavior, and of course, family and the greater community engagement. We're working really hard at the agency to work with a lot of the other teams there to make sure that the framework explicitly connects to kind of the larger statewide educational landscape. So by unifying a really progressive system of supports, personalization, flexible pathways, and proficiency within this culture of continuous improvement and decision-making for excellence and equity. And so our framework components work in concert with each other, and districts are going to be really successful when their continuous improvement and kind of analysis of their whole school's functioning is coordinated. So one of the changes or the enhancements has been a real focus on equity throughout the entire framework. And so you can see 2 of our kind of core principles, especially call out equity. And so our framework, which is pre-K through 12, really exemplifies that culture of continuous improvement, as I mentioned. And we're really hoping that it can be used as a lens through which decisions are made for every learner's academic, social, and emotional learning. And this applies to the adults in the schools and the districts as well. So we're really trying to engage with every student at that universal level of instruction, and then utilizing accommodations, adaptations, and interventions as often as they can be made available, and really layering in any supplemental and additional support as needed to really serve that whole child's learning. And so essentially, we're really looking at this as how do you improve and expand the entire system of your school or your district rather than kind of placing students in predetermined programs or interventions in the same existing system that you're not analyzing holistically. So this is a really fun graphic that we had designed for the field guide. It's really a big feature of the new field guide is how to utilize the system to identify the problem, and then kind of looking at the problem to help analyze the system. So you see that those white arrows in between are going both ways. So when the components are really balanced and working as interrelated and interdependent parts of a system, any new state statute or rules that are coming out can be implemented using the framework as a lens, rather than seeing MTSS as another thing to do on top of everything else that schools are having their time being competed for. And so we really encourage the leadership teams that we work with to say, how can this framework inform, for example, Vermont is working on a portrait of a graduate. So how can the framework really inform that work and not we'll deal with MTSS once we do this portrait of a graduate. And so the combination of the explanation in the field guide about Vermont MTS in action, that bigger circle, and we have reflection tools for each of these components that help schools really analyze what are our strengths and areas of opportunity for each, and how do we even begin to think about that and know what is something that we're doing well or that we could work on. So those reflection tools are really powerful conversation starters, and then kind of going component by component to solve whatever your priority of practice is. So when used in tandem with our self-assessment tool, the goal is to provide schools or districts with a really clear process and the evidence necessary to address their priorities, to figure out what should be involved in their continuous improvement plans. And so we, as I said, our team provides technical assistance, especially to district-wide, but also to individual schools, to really help them work through this complicated process of really understanding our framework and understanding how to view your own strengths and weaknesses. So this is another new visual that we're using for the field guide. So although our state statute and the name of our framework itself and my job title uses a tiered model of approach, we really want to point out that, at least in Vermont, there's no specific number of tiers that are required in a multi-tiered system of support. So there's no tier 2 students or tier 3 instructors, for example. Instructional supports, practices, and interventions, those can be tiered, but people cannot. So nor are we really replacing tiers with layers. It's not about semantics. We're really trying to change how the state is really thinking about the tiers. So when we speak of a Vermont MTSS system of layered supports, and this is for academic, social, and emotional learning at the district level, we're really emphasizing that the supports are made available to meet the needs of all students, not necessarily in a sequential way. So students might be accessing more than one type of intervention or more than one type of additional support at a time. And students with complex learner profiles might need a variety of support simultaneously. So within an addition to that universal instruction, or even outside of the school day, is kind of illustrated in the blue and the orange going outside of the purple universal instruction. So for example, a student might access support outside the classroom at a place-based learning setting, or even outside of the school day through coordinated counseling services. So these layered supports really retain the important elements of tiers that require all district educators to respond as early as possible when students evidence difficulty in either academic, behavioral, or social emotional areas. And the types of support that students receive do not supplant any access, membership, or engagement.
So I am Malia Hite. I'm the middle school math specialist for the Utah State Board of Education, and also the MTSS specialist. And what we're going to talk about is a little bit more about how we've developed our framework, which we call the UMTSS for Utah, and what we've done to push out that framework to the field, and how we're impacting the practices that are happening in our local education agencies, which is what we call our districts, and we have a lot of charters, so I'll say LEAs, and that is a local education agency. We started our work kind of officially within the world of MTSS with the SPDIG grant, the State Personnel Development Grant, which is out of the Office of Special Ed Programs. And we initially started with a focus on behavior and started with 6 LEAs and has now expanded to 36 LEAs where they have coaching and they focus on behavior and academics now. And we, as part of that program, have a statewide conference where teachers and educators and anybody who really has an interest in what's happening in the world of multi-tiered system of supports can come and see these sessions and help their practice to move forward. And that has been going on for several years. The UMTSS framework specifically, we started a draft in 2006 and it's gone through many revisions. And our current draft was started in 2014 and published in 2018. And we involved many stakeholders when we developed the framework. We had the state agency personnel, but we also had leadership from the districts and also charter schools. We had our higher ed and education prep program. They were part of the development so that we could all kind of be on the same page for when we say, and this is what MTSS is in Utah, that's what we mean. The UMTSS for mathematics is a specific document that was produced with a similar kind of stakeholder participation, and it's specific to mathematics. And so we really focus on, based on the foundation of equity, that we look at high quality instruction, data-based decision-making, and team-based problem solving to help students to achieve at those high levels. We, like Kat was saying, are one of the 7 states that does use math as one of our SIMR measurements. So we're looking at the proficiency for mathematics through our statewide assessment. And the reason this document was created is we created the cross-departmental implementation team, which we call CDIT, and that's part of our SIP plan, is that we wanted to team the gen ed side with the special ed side and get us together, because special ed tends to be like where MTSS lives, but in reality, it's a gen ed framework and it needs to live in gen ed. And so we needed to team with everybody in order to get our students with disabilities to have maximum positive outcomes. So once we developed this, and this was published, then we shared the document, which is really a SparkNotes version of the state's MTSS document, but with a specific focus on mathematics. And we disseminated that to every single person that has any world related to mathematics in the state of Utah. And so this summer, we had professional learning that was sponsored by the State Board of Education, but also it was designed by educators in the state of Utah, both special educators and gen educators, for every math educator in the state. And we focused on this document. We had 3 courses that we sponsored. We had 2 days for elementary, 2 days for secondary, and then 2 days around technology and how to effectively use technology within a math classroom to support these students within the different tiers. There were 6 locations where we did it. We kind of took it on the road throughout the state and had over 500 participants. And as part of this professional learning, we were able to partner with some of our legislation and legislative funding to allow educators to extend their learning and personalize the MTSS document to their personal work in the classroom. And they completed projects that helped them to apply what they had learned into what is going to really happen in their classroom, to make it really something that wasn't like, oh, that's nice, and that was a fun 2 days of work, but it became something that then was part of their practice. And we were able to pay our teachers for those who successfully completed those projects, which was kind of great. We created a video with a PR firm to help kind of push our message forward and help to explain what is the foundation of our UMTSS within mathematics, why is it important in Utah, and why and how can we help our students with disabilities specifically to overcome some of the challenges they have. It's a short video, it's like 2 minutes.
High expectations for all students. How Utah is solving the middle school mathematics gap. There are about 652,000 school-age children in Utah, and more than 75,000 of them are students receiving special education services. That's 1 out of every 10 students, or an average of 3 to 4 in every classroom. All students deserve a chance to be successful. Unfortunately, math proficiency for students with disabilities drops dramatically from 5th through 8th grade. By 7th grade, there is a 37% proficiency gap between the mathematics achievements of all students and those of students with disabilities. Middle school mathematics is a crucial part of the foundation for future success. Math comprehension in middle school affects ACT scores, graduation rates, and career trajectory. Educators like you can help close this gap with these proven methods. Step 1, establish high expectations. Include students with disabilities in rigorous grade level content. Promote success for every student by eliminating tracking based on perceived ability. Embrace a growth mindset. When we believe in every student and give them the right support, they're capable of learning and succeeding at high levels. Step 2, teach effectively. Engage all students in mastering the Utah core standards. Give them multiple opportunities to learn concepts and master big ideas over time. Incorporate effective teaching practices, like promoting student discourse and balancing conceptual with procedural understanding. Step 3, use the multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS. It's not about labeling students, it's about changing instruction. Instead of delivering one-size-fits-all instruction, the different tiers will help students at every level. The 3 major components of the MTSS framework include high-quality instruction, team-based problem-solving, and data-based decision-making. This will help all students master key mathematical concepts so they can reach their college and career goals. Pilot programs using these methods are already in place in Utah, and the results are promising. The Utah State Board of Education is looking forward to expanding the program and helping more students succeed in mathematics. All Utah students can be mathematicians.
That's the video that we put together and is really how we are helping to get the message out to the field. So our educators, our administrators, parents, the public, this is really what we're going to push to and uses the foundation for all of the other initiatives around mathematics, specifically in middle school and specifically for students with disabilities.